Good morning, everyone. Let's move to the last chapter of the first unit, that is chapter 4, and we will look more into about the life of Noah in this chapter. Again, from the life of Noah, we will moving ahead to the other things, or to up to the life up to the time of Abraham. Okay, so we will just begin, and we will start with lesson 4. This is the last chapter of the first unit. Okay, we've already seen a little bit about the times from the time of Adam and Eve up till the time of Noah, the chapter 5 and chapter 6. We have already seen those portions, so we will just move ahead, and we will see how and what the significance of Noah and his life and this flood holds and has in our understanding and biblical studies. Okay, so let's move ahead. So this chapter that we're going to do is chapter 4, and it is a new, it is called as a new start and the nations, a new start and the nations. So let's see what we'll be looking at into this chapter. So previously, we just saw that God was revealed in both as justice and love. So God revealed himself as both a God of justice and a God of love, God of judgment and a God of mercy. And we also saw that he punishes sin but cares for the sinners. And he because of that, he banished man from Eden, but he promised redemption. Okay, so we saw that God is a very balanced God, and his character is very balanced, his nature is very balanced. On one side, he is compassionate and loving. On the other side, he does not do away with the justice and the judgment part of it. Okay, so he knows when to show mercy, when to show justice. He knows when to judge, and when to love. Okay, so he knows all those things. And the most important part that we can see here, that he punishes sin, but he cares for the sinner. So it's a very it's a very difficult thing to do. As human beings, we tend to hate sinners themselves. Those who commit sin, we just try to label them, and we just want to do away with them. But God is not like that, and this is also something different from other religions also, because in every other religion we see that the sinners are being judged. Okay, the sinner has been sinner is judged, but here we see our God, he punishes sin. He wants to end sin, not the sinner. Okay, so he's not interested in ending the sinner, but the sin. Okay, so that's what we are seeing. So here we also see about the flood. Okay, about the flood and how it is a new beginning that God gives mankind, the clean and the new environment, and a sinful nature that brings problems. Okay, so that's what we are going to see. So through the flood, God is going to create a clean and new environment which has been spoiled by the sinful nature, and a lot of problems have come up. So after hundreds of years passed, we see Noah's descendants repopulate the earth, and again the crisis emerges, and how God deals with those times of crisis. So godless men lead a race in rebellion against God, and again God has to intervene. So it is like human being can never be trusted. Okay, human being always goes and falls into some kind of mess, creates some kind of messes, because of that fallen nature that we have. So we always go and end up into some kind of mess, into some kind of more wicked things. But God has to intervene, and he does intervene for the sake of the whole mankind, and he preserves, and he saves us, and he picks us up from there. So let's look into the outline. So mainly we will be dealing with the purification of the earth, the new world, and the repopulation of the earth. And there will be some subpoints within that. Okay, so let's begin. So we'll talk about the purification of the earth first. Okay, so the purification of the earth is mentioned, or it talks about the purification of the earth in chapters 7 to 8. Purification is actually a remedy for all kinds of pollution. So we all know that everything is purified to cleanse it. So if there is a dirty or soiled cloth, it is washed. We know that water is purified. We know that everything we do, even before cooking, we wash hands, we wash the vegetables, we wash everything that we're going to cook. Vessels are washed, utensils are washed, everything is washed. So everything is made clean, or clean or purified from the pollution that is surrounding us, from the dirt and everything that is surrounding us. Okay, so it is a natural thing that we always do. So purification is a remedy for all kinds of pollution, whether natural, moral, or spiritual. So everything needs purification. So the moral and the spiritual pollution of antediluvian world made it necessary for God to purify the earth. Hence, he sent a flood. So we have to understand that even in the antediluvian period, people were not away from sin. We all know that. And there was a lot of pollution, different kind of pollution, spiritual pollution, moral pollution that was going on in that time in the antediluvian period. Even today, we can see that. And and because of that, the whole earth was the whole world where people were living at that time, it was becoming polluted and was becoming horrible. And because of that, it was necessary in the sight of God to purify the earth and to set the flood so that human life can be sustained. Okay, so we will talk more about it in some time. So pollution, let's look at the pollution. Okay, so what are the pollutions that demand cleansing, that need to be cleansed? Environmentally, we can see that there is air poisoning, there is water poisoning, there is land, automobiles, factories, radioactive nuclear tests, chemical waste, spills of oil. Okay, so all these things causes damage or pollution or act as pollutants to the environment or to the nature. Okay, so all these needs to be cleansed. All this and more others affect all kinds of life, vegetation, and mankind. So we have to understand that all these have to be cleansed. That is why we see that all the governments throughout the world are taking steps to clean the oceans, to clean the seas, to clean the rivers, to stop deforestation. So we see that all things are even the even the automobiles, they are trying to make it less air pollutant. Okay, so we know that pollutions are increasing, but the government and all these factories are trying their best to save the environment and make things less polluting. Okay, so we know that environmentally there is a lot of pollution that is happening. Moral pollution, let's look at moral pollutions. What are the moral pollutions, or what what pollutes the moral life of the world? There are crimes, there are terrorism, wars, unrest, violence, corruption, destruction, selfishness, self-righteousness, self-centeredness, breaking of families, pornography, extramarital relations, fornication, homosexuality, rejection of the image of God by man. Okay, that is very bad. Rejection of the image. That is why we can do anything to anybody. Okay, because we do not consider them to be in the image of God. And then there is evolution from beasthood, because they have this thing in their mind because of the Darwin's theory that we have come from a beast. We have come from monkey, so we behave like that. Okay, so evolution from beast. Then we have relativist views, not absolute. So we do not have anything absolute that is absolute. You For me, something may be right or wrong. Okay, something may be good or bad, but for the other person, what is right for me may be wrong. Okay, so there is no absolute. Everybody is a relativist now. He may say that, okay, for you it may be wrong, but for me it is right. For me it is wrong, but for you it may be right. Okay, so they all argue on that basis. So there is no stable, there is no proper absolute on the basis of which people act and people talk. Okay, so now everything has become very relativist. So it depends from person to person, it varies from person to person. Next, we see the spiritual pollutions, the spiritual pollutants. So it will be definitely in regard with God. Okay, so it is doubts about God, about the true God, lies, unbelief, atheistic attacks, rationalistic attacks on supernatural, spiritual abuse, spiritual ministry to godless, emphasis on humanism, social gospel meeting social needs only. Okay, so the social gospel is good. Okay, but it should cater to the spiritual needs also, not only to the social needs. Okay, then worship of false gods, astrology, science, occult, witchcraft, worship of demons, etc. Okay, so all these things and more, basically these are not exhaustive list. All these things and more basically act as pollutants or pollutions for the environment, moral pollution, and for spiritual life. Okay, so let's move ahead and let us see the destruction that was caused in the flood. Okay, so let's look at the description of the flood first. So this is basically given in chapter 7. Okay, the flood was unpredictable and awesome, and it took the generation by surprise. Okay, so often God uses the natural phenomena to do his will. So yes, definitely God works supernaturally, but most of the time God does not go against the nature. God does not go against the environment, but God uses everything that is available to do his will. Okay, so that's how God works. If you know that even the way of worship, the way everything that God told people to do, or commanded people to do. It is basically, it was not anti-society. It was not anti-society, but according to the society only, God designed a pattern for the people to live in that way. So in the same way, we see that God does not go against the natural phenomena, but he uses these natural phenomena or the natural things to do his will. It also suggests that God did not, God did this by, there are some people, I spoke about this in the the first chapter also, we spoke about the flood. So many scholars suggest that this flood, how did this flood happen? So many scholars suggest that probably God tilted the axis of the earth. Okay, he tilted the axis of the earth, which caused gigantic waves. It caused gigantic waves and tides, high gigantic tides. Okay, and that caused climatic changes also, which caused rain to come down from the sky. Okay, so with 40 days and nights of torrential rains, rivers and lakes were flooded 7 meters more than, okay, it is like 7 meters or more than 20 feet above the mountain tops. Okay, so it's not about the plains, it's about the mountain tops. So it rained heavily, it flooded heavily. All the, the even the earth, there were spots on the earth which broke up and gushed water outside. Springs of water came out, and there was so much of water that it flooded. It was 7 meters above the mountain tops. Okay, above the mountain tops. So we can see that the springs of the great deep burst forth. The earth tilted on its axis. Sudden melting of icebergs, rising of the ocean levels, convulsive movements of the earth's crust. Okay, that earthquakes, tectonic plates, earthquake, volcanic eruptions, subterranean reservoirs broken, geysers, springs, new rivers, okay, were seen, and then upheavals of the ocean beds, gigantic tidal waves from all the oceans. Okay, all these things were happening. The floodgates of heaven, that is the rain, okay, the skies, gigantic typhoons, hurricanes, storms, torrential rains for 40 days and 40 nights, rising rivers and lakes, land saturated and flooded. So we can see that it rained so much, and there was so much of water that the earth could not contain, and there was water all over. So this is how basically God used the natural phenomena at that time, so that there was complete flood throughout. Okay, so that is how God used the natural phenomena. I'm stressing on the natural phenomena because God did not do anything supernaturally, but we can see that God used the natural phenomena all together. Okay, all these natural phenomena were used all together at one time, so that it creates so much, such an environment of flooding throughout the earth, and so much of water was there on the earth. The extent of the flood, let's look at the extent of the flood. This is a very controversial topic which has been there on debate for many years, and actually the scholars are divided on this aspect. The scholars are divided on about the extent of the flood, and no one has won actually till now. No one, it's not that more of the scholars talk about one point and the other point, but we can see that the extent of flood has always been a point of debate. Okay, and there are two views which will be seen. The first view is a universal view, that is a traditional universal flood theory, that is a traditional view, where the scholars talk about the whole earth being underwater or flooded. The other is local flood, which means that only the area in which the people were living at that time, only the area which was seen by the people at that time, that was flooded. Okay, and both of them have their own facts, both of them have their own views. Okay, and it's actually 50-50. Nobody has won the debate till now. So it's like, you may believe this or you may believe that. The thing is, the earth was purified. That's the point. Okay, so the flood was the greatest ever known, with a depth of almost 7 meters over the mountaintop. So it was the greatest flood ever known, and even till today it has not ever happened like this kind of flood, where the mountain tops were covered 7 meters above. Okay, which measure probably where the ark landed. Okay, probably it is a location in Turkey. Okay, in Turkey, or Asia Minor as we call it earlier. Okay, so it was that place where it landed at Mount Ararat, which was around 5,123 meters or 16,945 feet. Okay, above the sea level. So it was not very high at that time, but nonetheless it was quite high. Okay, and above that 7 meters, the river water, the flood waters had risen. Scientists find it hard to believe that the water subsided in such a short time if they really covered the whole earth to such depth. So it is a very valid reason that the scientists have doubts, are doubting about the amount of flood or the extent of flood, because the residing thing of the water, when the water subsided, it subsided very quickly. Okay, so it is not uh, if you say factually or intellectually, it is difficult to understand how did so much of water disappear in such a short period of time. So that is one of the reasons why the debate has come into being, where they talk about the local flood, and the flood not being for the whole universe or the earth. The depth above the mountain may refer to, okay, according to them, the depth of the water may refer to the height of the tidal waves. Okay, it's not the stable height of the water, that this is still amount of water, but probably what they're talking about, 7 meters, it may probably be the waves. Okay, the waves, the highest length of the waves, the tidal waves, it may be actually the 7 meters above the mountain tops. Okay, so that is what the scientists are saying. Okay, although God does use the natural phenomena, he is not slave to the law of the same. Okay, so some scientists say that yes, God does use natural phenomena, but he has created it, so he is not a slave of it. He can definitely make more of it. Okay, so that's how many of the scientists are talking about it. So Bible scholars hold two views, which are going to talk about right now, about the extent of the flood. First is the universal flood, or the traditional view. Okay, this view states that the flood water covered the whole earth and destroyed every living creature outside the ark except the fishes. Okay, so this view states that everything that was outside the ark was destroyed, as the water completely covered every portion of the earth as a planet, and everything was destroyed except the fishes, which are surviving in the water. So fishes will not die. So Francis A. Schaeffer gives three reasons for believing in this view of traditional flood. Okay, so universal flood. The first one is the language used is describing the flood. The language that is used in describing the flood shows us that probably it was a universal flood. The universal covenant made because it was saying that the whole earth was covered. Okay, that is what the whole land. That's what the witnesses or the people who have gone into the flood, they said that the whole land was underwater. That's what they say. So it is the language that is being used describes the flood to be water throughout the earth. Okay, the second thing that we can see here is the universal covenant made with the animal world as well as the human race. So this is a universal covenant that God made, that he will never send such kind of rain or water or flood on the earth. Okay, that's what is mentioned over here. And he makes this covenant with everything that is living, the human race and the animals and everybody, because he's not going to destroy everyone at the same time as he has done this in this kind of flood. Okay, the next is the parallelism with the universal judgment in the future. So if we try to make a symbolism, if you try to make a connect, if you try to make a type and anti-type with the future judgment, definitely the judgment will be of the whole universe. This judgment will be, of the whole earth, all the people living on the earth, definitely not the animals, but all the people living on the earth. And this also was judgment on the earth. So if you draw a parallelism, or if you draw a type and anti-type, or if you draw connection between the final judgment and the judgment right now in the flood, then definitely it talks about the universal flood. The whole earth was under water. So you can check the references that have been given. Okay, next is the local flood. Okay, so there are many reasons to believe that it was a local flood also. Okay, how? We can just see that this view states that it was a great flood. It was a great flood, definitely, that covered the inhabited earth of that day. Okay, so it did not cover the whole of the earth, but only the area that was inhabited by the people in those days. Okay, that means Mesopotamia and some parts of other lands around it. Okay, it simply means Mesopotamian region and some parts of lands around it was underwater, but not the whole globe or not the whole earth. Okay, so that is what the second group of scholars are talking about, who say that it is a local flood. The reasons can be stated as following. The Bible sometimes uses all the earth, the I think the words or the statement as all the other language. We're talking about the language part of it. The terms all the earth and under the whole heaven, referring to the known earth of that day. Okay, so known earth means the people, the lands till which the people have scattered. Okay, so in those times we know that the people were only dwelling in the Mesopotamian region. They had not gone beyond. They have not gone beyond the Mesopotamian and just the surrounding areas. So that was the inhabited portion of the land. Okay, so when supposedly, just for an example, what they are trying to say here is, supposing this is the eyewitness account that is coming to us. Okay, this is the eyewitness account coming to us, and people of those days have not moved towards the end of the earth till that time. Okay, so what is happening to them is right now, that when Noah and when Shem, Ham, Japheth and his family, they are seen from the ark. Okay, from the ark. So the areas till where they can see. Okay, from till the areas till where they can see, it's all under the water. So it's an eyewitness account. So supposedly, if you are living in Lucknow, I live in Lucknow, so Lucknow is flooded. Okay, so if we did not have the news channels and we did not have the aerial view, if we did not have these helicopters, go flying over it, and we do not have all these, equipments and technologies that in those days they did not have, apart from God, nothing could see from up. Okay, so the people living down, and they have a lateral vision, we can say that. They have a horizontal vision, they don't have a vertical vision. Okay, so we can say they cannot have an aerial view, they cannot climb on the birds and fly and look down. So what is happening right now is, suppose I'm living in Lucknow and I was living in those times where there was no news channels, no technologies available, no cameras, nothing. So it will be my account that, and probably I did not know that there was much of the earth available outside Lucknow or Uttar Pradesh. So when I see the flood is coming, I will see that the flood comes and my house is underwater and everything I see around me is underwater. Okay, so I will say that everything is underwater. The whole earth is underwater. The whole land is underwater. That's what I'm going to talk, and the people who see it are going to talk about it because they have not seen the furthermost areas of the land. Okay, so they are living in Lucknow and they see that the city of Lucknow is flooded, and they have no news from the other lands whatsoever is happening in their land. So this is what the scholars are trying to tell over here, that all the earth and under the whole heaven are referring to the known part of the earth in those days. Okay, so many times Bible uses earth and land and whole earth, whole land under the heavens in that particular context where the people know or people can see the amount of land. Okay, that's what the scholars are telling. So it is common practice to describe events as they appear to the viewer. So these are viewers' point of view or witnesses' point of view. So whatever they see is believed. So whatever Noah saw, whatever Noah's sons saw is believed, and they saw it that the land was underwater. They did not see the farthermost land because there was no technology to tell them what is happening on the other parts of the earth. Okay, so that is how the witnesses account works in those times. So a local flood would seem to be fit for the scientific calculations about the amount of water and the time necessary to recede. Okay, so the amount of water that came and the time necessary to recede that water suits this view. Okay, so God would not have to cover the whole or all the continents in order to destroy the incorrigible race. Okay, so these people who were so wicked, these people who had become so sinful, these people who had become so horrible, and they were not ready to take corrections. So God did not have to destroy the whole earth that He had created just to teach them a lesson or to correct them or to destroy them. Okay, to destroy this race. Reason being, they were only living in the Mesopotamian region by that time, and there's no purpose of destroying or spoiling the whole earth just because of this. So only covering this area into. So just to destroy these this race, God did not have to actually destroy the whole earth. They could it just sending a flood on the Mesopotamian region was sufficient. uh, for that purpose. Okay, so there was no need for destroying the whole earth for that reason. So God would not have to cover all the continents in order to destroy this incredible race. Okay, so the view that the flood only appeared universal does not deny the divine inspiration that kept the writer from error in the recording. So basically, when even when the author is talking about universal flood, or appearing of universal flood or local flood, it does not mean that the revelation or the inspiration is wrong at that time, because he's talking about the fact that took place and the people saw at that time. So whether the flood was local or universal, it has a universal significance. Okay, though the extent would be different, maybe it was local or universal, but the importance remains the same. It is a most general sweeping judgment, means the whole mankind was destroyed at that time. All the people living in the known area were destroyed at that time, and that was the most important thing. That was the most sweeping judgment, like general judgment, like everybody faced that judgment, and that happened at that time. And the whole creation was destroyed at that time. The whole world was consumed at that time. So we can say that though we may believe in local flood or we can believe in the universal flood, still we understand the significance of it, that the whole earth was out, everything was swept away. That's what is important. So terminating the old world, this was the end of the epoch, and the beginning of the new world, a reflection of the end of the world. Okay, so we have to understand that God terminated the old world and he began a new world. He wanted to begin a new world, and because he wanted to end the old things that were going on in that period. Okay, so that's what we are seeing over here. Okay, so before moving into archaeology, okay, before moving into archaeology, let's just think about some things over here. What do you think about the flood? Why did God send destruction? Was it not harsh? Was it not cruel? Cruelty of God that he planned to destroy the whole earth. Okay, so there are many scholars who talk about these views, and many scholars talk about it as a God bringing judgment on the sinners. And many people think about it that God was very cruel at this time when he decided to judge in such a way, where he killed all the animals and when he killed all the human beings. But if you go to understand in a proper way, you will understand that probably this was an um, act of compassion, act of mercy of God upon the whole earth, because the kind of life that the people were living, the kind of life that the people were living at that time, they were destroying each other. There were a lot of sins happening, crimes happening, violence happening, and people were living into is a life that was completely desolate, a life that was completely destructive. Okay, so if God would not have intervened and brought this kind of purification on the earth, the humankind would have messed everything, destroyed everything, and spoiled everything, all the creation of the earth, all the all the whole nature. Okay, so God had to preserve mankind. So instead of creating a new Adam and Eve, he had to preserve it. He had to preserve what he had created. So he did not allow the family of Noah being affected because of the corruption or the destruction of the whole mankind that it was moving towards. The sin that they were committing were actually bringing out a lot of sins, a lot of sicknesses, okay, which were not being treated at that time, and people were being violent towards each other and destroying each other. So this was actually moving towards complete destruction of the earth. So if not God saving some people and animals, human being would have destroyed themselves completely, and they would have suffered the consequences much more instead of just dying in the flood. They would have suffered unending sicknesses, unending ailments, unending bloodshed if God would have not intervened. Okay, so by doing this, God cleared the human race, cleared the sinful generation. Okay, and God basically cleansed and he sustained the and he preserved the people from where more people would come into being. Okay, and animals also. So instead of man destroying man and doing everything bad to everything destruction, God intervened, and it is seen as an act of mercy from the side of God instead of act of destruction. Okay, now let's see the archaeology and the flood. Okay, so in this part, we can see that the anthropologists and the archaeologists have found ancient traditions of the Great Flood. and rescue. Okay, so even the archaeology has been digging in, and flood has been always such a important concept that people, the archaeologists were trying to find out things, the stories of it. Okay, so some common and parallel stories show remarkable similarities with that account of with the account of Genesis. Okay, so there are other. I have already told you that there are other stories also found in other cultures where which are quite parallel and similar to what is mentioned in the Genesis account. So the ancient Greek stories, we can see it in the ancient Greek stories, many North American Indian tales and narratives that have similar names and details. Okay, so but little bit of differences would be there, but they would be having different names probably, but narratives would be quite similar. Okay, details would also be quite similar in the place and the names and the people and the god, and those will be different, but the narratives is quite similar. Story part is quite similar. Okay? So, however, the traditions are very widely and contain polytheistic and mythological features. Okay, so these traditions that we see, that these traditions that we have, which are which carry the stories parallel narrations, they may be polytheistic in nature and quite mythological in its features, which our story is not. Okay, so the records of the ancient Babylon. Okay, so we have the archaeologists have dug in, and they have got some tablets and everything from the ancient Babylon, that is nearest to the Genesis account. It is quite similar to the Genesis account. Example, a cuneiform tablet dating from 2000 BC. Okay, a cuneiform tablet, you all know what is cuneiform tablets. Okay, so it was found in around 2000 BC in Nippur, in Babylonia. And it tells us how the king Zeusudra, okay, was warned by the gods of an approaching deluge. Deluge is flood. Okay, so it says that how King Zeusudra was warned by the gods, the demigods, of an approaching deluge which was to be sent on mankind. So it seems that gods had decided, the higher gods had decided to send flood or bring the land under deluge. Whole mankind in the deluge, and the king Zeusudra was warned by the demigods, okay, the small gods of the approaching flood. Okay, so what he did was, so the king built a great boat and escaped. Okay, so similar. Okay, so but it was not the intervention of God over here, but we can see that the King Zeusudra built a boat and escaped with his family. The best known parallel flood account is the Epic of Gilgamesh. This has a lot of similarities. Okay, the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is you can even see it in the online. You can go check, and you will find these stories, these narratives over there. The language is a little different and it is not easy to understand, but it's quite similar. Okay, so the Epic of Gilgamesh, this is a very ancient Babylonian tradition, okay, translated into Assyrian, which was found in Nineveh. Okay, so Babylonian tradition hai, but it was found in Nineveh in Assyria. Okay, so here the Babylonian Noah is Utanapishtim. Okay, so we have the name Noah, but they have the name Utanapishtim. Okay, so he describes to Gilgamesh. Okay, describes to Gilgamesh how God Ea warned him in of an impending deluge. Okay, so there's a god called Ea. Okay, so Ea actually warned him of an impending deluge which is going to happen. He built a boat in which he saved his family and certain craftsmen and domestic and wild animals and treasures of silver and gold. Okay, so he kept all these things in the boat. The deluge was so violent that was sent by God. So the gods were terror stricken. Even the gods who sent the flood were terrorized or terror stricken by the flood that took place. Okay, so the flood ended in around 7 days. Okay, the flood ended in about 7 days, and the boat rested on Mount Nicer. Okay, Nicer, which is in northwest of Persia or Turkey. So for us, it landed in on Mount Ararat. For them, it landed on Mount Nicer, which is northwest of Persia or Turkey. Okay, so we see that Utanapishtim sent out birds similar like dove or a swallow and raven. Okay, dove, swallow, or and raven. Okay, that's how he also sent. But a raven did not return. Okay, raven did not return. So he too sacrificed to the gods and gathered, and we can see that he also, after he got out of the boat, he sacrificed animals, and the gods, they just came down from heavenly abode and gathered around the sacrifice like flies. Okay, that's how it is mentioned in the tradition of Gilgamesh that we can see. It's quite similar to the story that we have in Genesis. Okay, so these traditions probably had a common source in the experience of mankind. So Noah's sons told their children, and the story was passed through the generations. In this process, as Noah's sons repopulated the earth, some developed false religions and adapted the story of the flood to fit their own religion. That's how the things have changed. Okay, so but the biblical account remains the same, unchanged, and is a faithful record of what has happened. So we believe that the account that is mentioned in the Bible is a true account, and it has not been affected by the changes that came into the religions. Okay, and it has been mentioned as it is by Noah and his son. Okay, so it is known that the people before the flood did keep the historical records. Okay, so we are not sure, but it is known, or it is seen that we have some tablets from the olden times which have come up, and we understand that people in the olden days, they did keep the historical records. Okay, and it includes the genealogy that is back up to Adam. So from Adam, genealogies have been seen in the tablet form. Okay, so the author of Genesis had access to these records, and the Holy Spirit guided them in the process of recording. So we see that Moses, probably who has written the book of Genesis, had access to these records, and because he has been in Egypt, and Egypt was a center of education at that time, and it had a lot of records. And he also moved to different places. So we see that he gained knowledge from all these records, and he, under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, used all these things to write down the proper description. Okay, so the existence of the flood traditions is the evidence of the historical accuracy of the Bible. So because it is evident in the traditions, the flood is evident in the traditions, so it proves, or it gives evidence to the historicity and the accuracy of the account in the Bible. Okay, next we will see about the preservation in the flood, how God preserved through the flood. Chapter 6, verse 9 to chapter 8, verse 14. Here we see a relationship between God and Noah. Okay, there's a very beautiful relationship between God and Noah. So first thing that we see is they were safe in the ark. Okay, so in New Testament, the flood serves as a warning that God is a just judge. Okay, so if we see the concept of flood in the New Testament, we can see it as a warning that God is a just judge, and He can punish by sending flood. So flood is a sign of judgment. Okay, in the New Testament, so He punishes sin and rescues His own, that we know about God, and Jesus used it to illustrate His expected and uncertain is expected and sudden return in judgment. Okay, teaching the believers to always be ready. So as the people were not ready in the time of Noah, though he was warning them, in a similar way, even today, we warn people, and people are not ready to learn and to listen. In the same way, Jesus says that in just as a flood came suddenly, okay, without people understanding or knowing anything, in the same way, Jesus is also, and his judgment is also going to come suddenly, and it will catch people in panic. Okay, so that's what Jesus also illustrated using the example of the flood and his coming. Okay, so the flood and his coming is used type and as a type and antitype. The flood is also a type of the coming destruction of the earth by fire in order to bring God's new age. So we can also see that the coming destruction of the earth by fire, not by water, but by fire, and the new age will be coming after that, and the home of righteous. So we can see that at that time God sent flood, but now God may also use fire to bring judgment, and after that everything is destroyed, and then after that will be a new heavens and the new earth, and there will be a place and a home for the righteous to live in. So Apostle Paul sees a parallel between water baptism and salvation of Noah and his family in the flood. Okay, so there are we are seeing there are many parallelisms of the story, or many symbols, or many many lessons that we can see. First was warning of warning of judgment. Then the second was Jesus talking about his sudden coming, and then we see here there is a parallelism between fire and flood. Destruction and beginning of the new earth and the new age. And now here we see a parallel between um, water baptism and the salvation of Noah. That Noah was underwater for so many days, and in the same way baptism we take place where we go underwater and we come out. Okay, so that is the symbolism here. The flood water symbolize both God's judgment on sin and its result as death. Okay, because anybody who was drowned in the flood resulted in death, so that is a judgment of God. When judgment comes upon people, they die because of the sin. So baptism signifies a mystical uniting of believer with Christ, okay, in his death and burial and resurrection. So just as Noah, they were in the water and they came out of the water, in the same way we can see that the people, we also die in Christ and we rise with his resurrection when we come out of the water after baptism. Okay, so as Noah passed safely through the waters of the flood to a new world, so the believer in Christ passes safely through the waters of judgment and death to the new creation, to a new creation, to become a new creation. Okay, next we can see as patient expectancy. Okay, patient expectancy. But God remembered Noah. Okay, it is mentioned in chapter 8 verse 1 that but God remembered Noah. Okay, this statement is simply a human way of saying that the Lord turned his attention from destroying the evildoers to the needs of Noah. That means God was so much into destroying the sinful world, the sinful nature of the world, that he actually missed thinking about Noah, okay, which is not true. It is just a human way, anthropomorphic way of saying. So we can see here that God was destroying everything, but God's now focus shifted on Noah. That's it. Okay, so it implies that God was going to do something new for Noah. It simply means that God was going to do something for Noah. So God closes the floodgates of heaven after long days, 40 days and 40 nights of flood. God closes the floodgates of heaven and springs of deep and strong wind blew on the earth. Okay, so बहुत तेज हवा, a deep wind, a strong and deep wind was blowing all over the earth, which began to recede the water slowly. Okay, because of the sunshine, because of the breeze and the wind, strong winds, the storms, the water started to recede. Okay, so here we see God using again the natural processes to accomplish his purpose. Okay, so 40 days later, after the mountaintops became visible, when the mountaintops were visible, when Noah could see from the windows, because it was surrounded by windows. So after Noah could see from the windows, he saw the mountain tops. So what happened was he sent out raven and dove. Okay, so dove brought after the last point we see second time when the dove went out, we see that it brought a fresh olive leaf, a fresh olive leaf. So there is a lot of symbolisms in that. Symbolically, the olive leaf was a token of a renewed earth because there was fresh plants growing. Okay, so it brought that fresh tender leaf, and it means a renewal of the earth and dove's gentleness and purity. And dove is seen as a gentle and pure bird, and it symbolizes the Holy Spirit. Okay, so dove with an olive leaf is also seen as a symbol of world peace. Okay, so Noah was patient and trustfully peaceful. So Noah trusted God and he was peaceful, and in his mind he knew that God is the same God who began the good work will also bring it to the completion. If God is the one who brought the flood and put them in the ark, he is the one who is going to bring them out and he bring the work to completion. So Noah and his family were 1 year and 10 days, okay, 1 year and 10 days in the ark. Okay, can you imagine? Noah and his family were 1 year and 10 days in the ark and protected by God. He had shut the door and he will open it. So God had shut the door. Noah couldn't open that door. So God himself will open that door. Okay, so next thing that we're going to see here is the new world order. Okay, chapter 8, verse 15 to chapter 9, verse 29. So flood marks the passing of the old order and the beginning of the new one. Okay, so the uh, flood marks the passing or closing or finishing of the old order and beginning of the new order. It swept evil work, okay, swept away evil work of men and saved the godly line from the danger of being absorbed by the evil. So I already told you that why basically God was sending the flood, because it had to sweep away the ungodly, because they were being dangerous for the godly people, and probably they would have destroyed or absorbed the good people also. Okay, so God makes provision that form the basis of Noah and his family to live in a world without other people. Okay, so we see that these people are going to live in this earth after this, and God made provisions for that also. So a new beginning, we can see a new beginning that is going to happen. So this no the new world order brings in a new beginning, or a beginning of a new life. So walking with God in the new life involved receiving instructions, obeying, and believing in his promises. So this thing we see even in Noah right now, that when the new life began, it simply meant that he had to walk with God. So walking with God basically meant that this new life would be when he receives instructions from God, reception, this instructions from God, and obeying those instructions and believing in his promises. Okay. Then we see that there was an orderly exit. That's very important. There was an order. There was so much of peace and joy inside the ark, and there was so much of calmness inside and harmony inside the ark, that when the people came out, when the people and the animals came out, nobody did any kind of stampede. Nobody stepped or gushed out or rushed out from the ark. That, "Arey, it's been long that we have been inside the ark. Now let's just move out." Okay, it's nothing like that. Okay, but we see that there was an orderly exit. Two by two, as they came in, they went out. Okay, so and now they went out as families also, because the animals had reproduced already. Okay, so there was a great consecration. We can see there was an orderly exit. Then there was a grateful consecration. Noah built an altar immediately after after the ark landed. Noah built an altar and offered a burnt offering, and the whole animal was burnt. Okay, the animal was completely burnt, not the parts of the animal, but the whole animal was completely burnt. It symbolized a complete surrender, complete consecration. Okay, it is for the first time we see in the Bible that the word altar is mentioned. Okay, so before that there was offering, before that there were sacrifices, but there was no mention of altar. But here it is the first time where Bible mentions the word altar. Okay, so now after that we see the third point, that is, there was divine assurance. There was a divine assurance. God delighted in the pleasing aroma of Noah's gratitude and worship that went up with the order of the sacrifice. So it's not that God is enjoying the sacrifice, but God is enjoying the reason for the sacrifice. The reason that Noah was obedient and success plan has succeeded, and now his worship was an aroma that was mesmerizing God, that was beautiful for God. So it was not just the sacrifice that we're talking about, that the order of the sacrifice was pleasant for God, but no, this is a reason behind the sacrifice that is pleasant for God. Okay, so he would never again send such a catastrophe to punish the incorrigible race until the time of final judgment. So God promised that he was not going to destroy the earth in this way ever after this, for the people to correct the people. Okay, so let's see. We just saw that the basis for a new life. We are going to see the basis for a new life now. Okay, so we saw a beginning of the new life. Now we are going to see the basis for a new life. Okay, so that is mentioned in chapter 9 verses 1 to 17. So just as Noah entered into a new life, we too come to God with faith, obedience, and sacrifice of Christ as basis for our acceptance. Okay, so Noah also entered with the sacrifice, and we also enter with the sacrifice and obedience unto God. So there are some things that God gave to Noah, okay, at that time, and we have to note these things down. Okay, first thing is blessing. God blesses Noah and his family spiritually as well as materially. So God's blessings are not partial. His blessings are always complete. Okay, so complete means it is spiritual as well as material. It is never only material, it is never only spiritual, it is both ways, spiritually and materially. Okay, the second thing, it is decrees. A decree is an order with the force of a law. Okay, so God gave several decrees to provide the right relationship and guidance for the new life. So God had to define some rules. God had to define some commands for the people, so that they may not mess up once again, and they may not live a corrupt life as they were living earlier. So what are these commands or decrees that God gave them? God commanded Noah's family to be fruitful and fill the earth. Okay, so Noah's family was supposed to be fruitful and they were supposed to be filling the earth. So they had to scatter, they had to move around. Okay, next is God confirmed man's dominion over the animal world. So before this, we can see that God had given them dominion, but now it is in a different way. Now that they will be able to eat non-veg food. Okay, so God prohibited eating and drinking of blood. So they were the second thing that we saw, that they would be earlier they were supposed to take care of the animals. Now God has allowed them dominion, which means they can kill animals and have them as food. Okay, so this is the first time we can see that a human being is allowed to have non-veg or animals for food. So the second, next thing, third, we are saying that God said you can have animals, but do not drink their blood. Okay, do not have their blood. Eating or drinking blood is not allowed. Okay, so the next is God established capital punishment, which was very important. Now God established capital punishment to restrain violence. Okay, so till now people were not allowed to, people were not killed, or they did not die because of killing anybody. But now this capital punishment, ki khoon ke badle khoon. Okay, so jaan ke badle jaan, jo hum dete hain, bolte hain. So God established a capital punishment that they will be killed, or they will be in the hands of God, and they will be killed because if they kill anybody. So this was to restrain the violence. So if you kill anybody, you will be killed. That's what God wanted to say. So to save your life, don't kill anybody. That's what God is saying. So God taught that humans are of great worth because they are made in the image of God. So God wanted to say to the people, humankind, that they have great worth and they have great importance because they are made in the image of God. Do not undermine the image of God in anyone. Okay, so if you are made in the image of God, the other is also made in the image of God. So do not undermine the image that God has in any individual. So murder is an enormous crime. Do not murder. Murder is fratricide. Fratricide means killing a brother. So do not commit fratricide. Do not kill anyone. Martin Luther saw this ordinance as establishment of a new human government. Till now, God did not give any rules of living. Okay? So now this is the first time that God is giving rules for a human government or living. So the power God gives man over lives of others is such a circumstances implies that authority is less. The authority is in lesser areas, such as taking measures to prevent crime. Okay, taking measures to prevent crime and collecting taxes to support the government. So we can see that God gave them a lot of power in the man's hand. So till now, man did not have so much power, authority in his hand, but now God gives them a lot of power and authority with which they can do a lot of things. A lot of things. They can charge taxes. They can, do a lot of things, and they can also have power over the others' lives. That is what God is talking over here. So Paul says human government was divinely instituted in Romans 13, 1 to 7. So we see that here God is instituting a divine human government through Noah. Okay, giving commandments to Noah. So we have a small description over here, provisions for Adam and provisions for Noah. This is very important. So Adam, we can see God told him to be fruitful and increase. Same thing God told Noah to be fruitful and increase. Then Adam, he told fill the earth. To Noah also he told fill the earth. To Adam, he told subdue it. To Noah, he did not tell him to subdue it. Okay, then we have to Adam, he says dominion over animals. To Noah also he says dominion over animals. And now earlier there was no fear of mankind on animals, but now animals will be gripped by the fear of mankind because meat is added to their diet. Okay, so now man can eat meat, so animals will be afraid of the mankind. Okay, so the vegetables, they were given Adam's side, they were given vegetables and fruits to eat. For Noah, they were allowed to eat meat. Okay, but eating blood was forbidden. So one food that was forbidden in Adam's time was the fruit from one tree, that is the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. But here only blood was forbidden, and the death for murderers was given. Okay, these were the measures that God gave to Adam as well as to Noah. Third thing as we see here is covenant. Okay, so covenant is a mutual agreement between two parties. Okay, but the divine covenant is different. Okay, so normally what is the covenant is an agreement between two parties where they call out the rules and they decide something. But here we see that it is a divine covenant over here. It is very different. Here it is more solemn and it is more binding on people as a divine promise. So God, here God alone makes the commands, or here God alone makes the terms and conditions and determines the conditions and fulfills the promise. So everything is done by God. Man is just an object over here. Okay, so God is the one who decides the terms, God is the one who decides the conditions, and God is the one who fulfills his promises. So man is a lesser partner and usually enjoys the covenant blessings. So here also we can see that though man has no say, but he is there to enjoy the blessings of the covenant as long as he obeys God. So the main part is to obey God. The main part is to obey his commandments. So God established covenants with Noah, Abraham, Moses, and David. Each covenant became richer in promise and in revelation of God's redemptive purpose. So gradually, as people followed the covenant and obeyed the covenant and obeyed the laws and obeyed the conditions, we see that the promises became more developed and the revelation of God's redemption became more purposeful. Okay, so most of the covenants were made with particular people and were conditional. Okay, so even today, if God makes any covenant with us, it is always conditional. Condition is obedience. Normally, condition is obedience. Okay, so we can understand that most of the covenants which were made with that particular people, when God makes a particular people, it is conditional. But God's covenant with Noah, there is a difference over here now. Usually it is conditional covenants, but now what God made with Noah, it was completely unconditional. Now, what does unconditional means? It means that it did not depend on God's behavior did not depend on the attitude or the behavior of the human being. So God will fulfill this covenant even if a human being is obedient or not obedient. So this is the only unconditional covenant which God makes with humankind. It was made with all humanity and the world and the animal world and earth itself. So God promised this from his side that he's not going to do it again. Okay, even though mankind would do a lot of things against him, God is not going to react in this way. So God made the rainbow as a sign of his covenant. Okay, so this rainbow was a sign of the covenant. Okay, next we will move into the family problems in the next class. So this is we'll stop the class over here and we will talk about the family issues of Noah in the next class.